Hello, the stream is live over on Twitch, YouTube, Instagram, X, and Kick. But I'm going to be muted as we got roofers next door making a lot of noise. Feel free to ask questions in chat. I'll keep an eye on it. I need to do a focus test on the camera. Hello there. Thanks for stopping by. Hope you like it. For the music, I have metal that I generated through AI, unfortunately. I don't have those kinds of resources to put original material up or pay for the copyright. Um, so, background music is about a 30-minute loop of AI metal. That way, I keep it generic and simple. If I were streaming just on Twitch, then I would play different music in the background. That way, my VOD with my VOD set up to not record. In fact, I am listening to different music, listening to Iron Maiden, listening to Megadeth, Possessed, Venom, Slayer, already mentioned Megadeth. Listening to a lot of different metal bands in my ear right now. I just wish I could share that with you while I'm doing the drawing, because it's a huge, huge part of doing creating the artwork. Yeah, I need a little bit of a straight edge to throw on here. So I'll use one of these papers. I like this reference that I'm using from TrueRef over on Pinterest. It's a beautiful pose. The lighting's great. It's got a lot of deep shadows. It's got some lighter areas and so forth. Unfortunately, it looks like the photo's a little bit tilted, so it seems to kind of throw me off a little. But I can still work with it. It was one of my favorite poses I was looking at this morning to choose for the stream. And I'll probably be going into the ink wash part here very shortly. I don't spend a lot of time on these, roughly about an hour or so, before I move on to the next thing. These are just my sort of daily practices. The cat, occasionally my cat, Kaiser, comes by and I feed him little snacks and stuff. I think he's taking a nap right now. But I do, that's our house cat there. His name's Kaiser. I will mute every now and then because we have roofers next door working on our neighbor's house, and it's pretty loud. You might hear some banging coming through the mic, so I may mute it every now and then. Just doing a quick glance over everything. After a quick sketch out of the figure, I can see where, I maybe missed the target in some areas. And I think I got enough of a stretch in the back to convey the pose that, she's portraying here and what's going on. She has this really cool bow staff in her hand. Whether she's sort of dancing with it or she's going to start twirling it around, she's going to bop you in the face with it. There is a sort of mid-action going on here. Maybe she's swinging it or something like that. So it almost looks like it's a mid-pose. My balance is okay on my drawing. When you look at the drawing on the screen, I know it's a little bit crooked. So I'm going to see if I can kind of straighten it out. Seeing the table makes it crooked as well, so it's not going to help too much. But I do want to make sure that she looks balanced in the drawing. I have enough of a pencil sketch in. I'm going to go through and lay down gray wash, so I'm going to take a moment just to mix up some water and India ink, and then just slather a mid-tone all the way across, and then I'm going to add in some deeper areas and then try to pull out some highlights. Might need a little bit of white gouache or white Prismacolor or something like that to help bring out those highlights. I'm not going to get too deep with this study. Like I said, I try to do these in a short amount of time to kind of warm up and to move into the next thing. I do want to make sure I have every element. I want to make sure I have every part in there that I need. Okay. Let's do some gray wash. Okay, we're going to mix up some distilled water and some Higgins brand Black Magic ink. Okay, we have our bubble palette here with one spot filled up with, hang on. Okay. I think I can jump in on the mic here for a moment, sort of explain a little bit of what I'm doing here at this stage. I've laid down a mid-tone just completely across everything. Do wish I used a bigger brush so I can work with that bigger swath at once a lot easier than with a skinny brush. After that, I've let the ink dry a bit. Not too high on that one. I want the ink to dry, and then I can start adding in more layers of darkness where I need the darker shadows. This is an ink wash, not a watercolor, so this ink wash is unforgiving. Once you get that water down and you move it around in place where you want it, it's set. You're not going to be able to adjust edges or smooth things out very easily. You can, but ink, it just doesn't seem to blend as well. I'm just going through and adding in lighter touches of more ink, just building it up as I go. And to kind of repeat what I mentioned earlier about the figure itself, doing a quick sketch out of the figure, I can see where maybe I missed some areas or maybe didn't hit the target as well. Is my anatomy well? No, probably need to keep working on that. Using the ink, this is what I'm applying now. I'm glad is sort of dark enough to show up through the video. I would prefer to go a little bit lighter at a time. But I want to get in as much as I can, as quickly as I can, because I'm not going to spend all day on this. But I do want to pull out those darker, shadowy areas. Ink wash will when ink wash is applied, it's very intense. But as it dries, its intensity sort of fades a bit. So it's something you have to keep an eye on if you're working with just India ink and some distilled water. I'm still using this same mixture. If you saw what I was doing earlier, unfortunately I wasn't able to talk at the same time, but I'll move the camera here in just a moment to show you the ink mixture a little bit better. Get just a little bit more over here. dry brush it in to kind of break up that hard edge. That helps too. Okay. Working with the ink wash today. It's pretty simple. I added a little pool of distilled water here in one of these bubbles. I added 2 drops of India ink in another bubble, and then I'll dip my wet brush into a little bit of ink, add it into the water to kind of get that mixture of water and ink, and then I'll test it out to see how it shows up on paper. Also want to make sure it shows up well enough for viewers to see. I go back and forth, adjust between a little bit more ink in the same pool of water until it becomes too dark, and if I need to tone it down, I just make another pool of water. A second clean pool of water, and then just dip a little bit of that older ink into the new pool of water. Yeah, right here where I have my brush currently, that kind of area faded a little bit. So have to be careful with the ink. Sometimes you need to apply the ink down a little bit darker. One part that's going to require a lot more darkness is definitely her hair. I'm going to wait till that area is dry before I add more to it. Don't want to pull up too much water on the paper. That's going to cause the fibers to break apart. Okay, I'm going to let this dry for a moment. And let it dry. And then start pushing in more darker areas. It looks like I've been streaming for about 40 minutes. We're working on this for around 40 minutes. So we'll go a little bit longer. Keep pushing in darker areas. Sometimes I can keep working with that same pool of water, of ink water, to layer more darkness on top. Sometimes I need to add just a little bit more ink to it. And sometimes you can break up those hard edges. Just a little bit of water, as long as it's still sort of fresh. Got one edge right here that I can't blend in. to start adding a little bit more darkness in. Okay. Just a little over 50 minutes into it. Hey, Retro. Good to see you, man. It's most definitely retro time. Hope you're having a good day today. Well, hope you can forget about the rough part of the day and chill out for the rest of your day and enjoy it and not worry about those rough times no more. I guess until tomorrow, right? Alright, what do I want to do with this at this point? Keep working on it, of course. I would love to. I'll do these to start off to get practice in with, shading with different tools, different materials. For the past couple of weeks, I've been using an iPad, using digital tools to work with figure studies, shading, textures, things like that. Let me turn down my music here. I have separate music going on in my ear that I can't quite play everywhere. There we go. And working with the digital tools has made things so much easier, quicker in a way. It's definitely fun, whether it's traditional or digital, but traditional has a lot of discipline behind it that definitely need to keep in mind. Going back to what I mentioned with ink wash and working with ink wash and how unforgiving it is. It's a little bit different. It feels like from just regular watercolor. It's a little bit easier to blend even after it's dried up a bit. Ink does not give you that opportunity. So once you lay it down, you've committed to it, whether you're happy with it or not. The whole point of this is to study what you've done. Oh no, Retro, man, you're having some mega issues with your class. With all your classes? Yeah. Yeah, if it's, without telling me too much, this sounds like this is, maybe like a community college or college campus that you're dealing with, and it's, man, yeah, they're gonna go to lunch while you're trying to set your stuff up. They kind of don't care, huh? All right. I'll stop here because I want to spend a lot of time on the comic stuff. Let's get my signature. Within that hour, I would like to lay things out, draw it out, lay it out the mid-tone, push in some darker areas, and then start bringing out some lighter areas. So what I need to do when I work with gray wash on the next figure study is do the same thing where I gave it here. So this is what I did yesterday. This was yesterday's stream. This is a True Ref pose as well. They're both by True Ref, which you can find on Pinterest. They have a profile. They have a profile there, and all their poses are professionally done, well lit, good poses. Yesterday was just adding in gray wash on the figure, but today I started off with the gray wash in a bigger area. I need to make sure I have a bigger brush on hand. That way I can apply that wet ink or that water ink all the way around in a bigger area. From there, adding in more darker tones and shaded areas to find better shapes and detail. Do I make it Did I make it look like the model? Not quite. There's some areas that need to be worked on and focused on a little bit better, but trying to fit that within an hour can be a huge challenge. So we're going to keep going. We're going to keep trying. For tomorrow's stream, I'm not ending the stream now because we're going to do some more stuff, but for tomorrow when I do a figure study, I'll have a new study or a new pose, and then I'll try to work on those steps within the same hour time frame. Okay. I'm going to keep the ink around. It's just a little bit of water and a couple of drops of ink. Make sure I don't spill it on the carpet. I'm just going to set it aside for now. And go through and separate this top sheet of watercolor paper from the rest of the block that's still glued on all edges. If I didn't go over this before, the paper I'm using, actually I know I did not go over this before, the paper I'm using is a watercolor paper block, 9 by 12 size, yeah, 9 by 12 size, 140 pound. All that information is down here. So it's a thick weight. Is this a cold press, I believe? It may not say. It's a good quality paper for working with ink wash, watercolors, wet media, but it's going to be glued on all edges. And I like that because it keeps the paper down. If you're applying a lot of water to it, it's going to bubble and ripple a little bit. This acts as if this glue on the edges acts as if you have your paper taped down to the board. Once I'm done with it though, I want to separate it. That way it's ready to go for the next drawing. If you ever have a block like this and you have glue on all edges, all you need to do to separate your sheet is to fan it out, carefully, gently bow your block of paper so that you start seeing the paper, you start seeing the pages separate. And I've played with this so much at this point that almost all the pages are already separating. But once you have a little bit of space separating your top sheet from everything else, usually you can just run your finger in through here, but the glue could be holding onto that paper quite well. Use a palette knife, a painter's knife for mixing. I don't have one handy, so I'm just going to use a average little pocket knife and run your knife. Let's move that brush here. And just carefully and gently run your knife flat between the top sheet and the bottom block. Don't force it in case it's cutting into the paper. And I don't like to use my fingers because my fingers are thicker than this knife, and it kind of curls up the paper, messes up the paper a little bit. Okay, there we go. So this being set aside, I can continue working on this if I wanted to. I would much rather redo the drawing and then redo the shading and stuff. Alright, I'll set that aside. Get some water here. Pardon me. Okay. I'm now going to remove our reference. We don't need that anymore. Let me see if I can go into just traditional. There we go. That's what I want. How's everything running over here on this scene? You got some metal in the background. Let me make some adjustments here. Okay, cool. I've traded in the reference photo for a picture of my cat. Let me get rid of some of these things. Let me start pulling out the things that I'm going to need today. To work on our comic stuff. And then I'll start explaining exactly what I'm going to be doing. I do need to do a camera adjustment, looks like. I like to use this. Adjust the focus on my camera so you guys can see it better. There we go. Bam, that'll work. Until I move the camera again. When I have the camera up high so that you guys can see a bigger sheet of paper, it's harder to see details, and if I start working with graphite pencils or anything lighter, I'll need to bring the camera in a little bit closer so you guys can see it. Okay. The comic book stuff that I'll be getting into today is starting up a comic book page for basically a digital comic strip. I'm not going to create it in digital. I may do some coloring in digital. In fact, I may just keep it black and white. Black and white, gray tone, all can be done on the bristboard paper I have here. And it's a 14 by 17 size. Looking at the other camera, you can see how big it is. And we'll typically work with this for drawing out comic book pages and covers and stuff like that, and then we can shrink that down to the actual size. That allows us to draw in more detail, texturing and so forth, so when it's shrunk down it looks pretty sharp, looks pretty good. For the comic book subject, we're working with Mission Decontrol. Decontrol is my gaming profile, and I use my gaming profile to sort of tell stories. The character I'm using is based off a video game model that I'm going to sort of make a little bit more generic to avoid copyright infringement and stuff like that, but it's all heavily inspired by the game, and so I want to keep that sort of connection, but I want to have fun with creating a comic book strip. We'll take this 14 by 17, lay out some panels, draw in a scene beginning to end, much like you would see in a newspaper comic book strip. The difference is we're not going to be drawing this as a wide strip of 3 or 4 panels in a row. Instead, these will be stacked much like a comic book page. Once shrunk down, it'll be roughly, an 8.5 by 11 size, which is a normal paper size for printers and what you have in your books and stuff like that. That black and white artwork I can then post, and that'll be my comic strip. I think this being sort of the first strip for this, I think I just bumped my camera a little bit. It being the first comic for this, I'll take my time with it. I'm going to pencil in rough drawings, so illustration's not going to be tight, clean, comic book page, pencil artwork. I want to meet in the middle. I want to pull in the quality and meet with a tighter timeline. So instead of going through cleaning up pencil work that's going to give me clean edges, no sketch lines and stuff like that, I'm just going to ink directly on top of this and then clean up what I can. It's going to be a little bit rough, and that's really how I like it. If we go into pages that we're going to scan in and lay out or compose into a printed booklet, that's where I'm going to put more time and effort into cleaner artwork for the stream, for the purpose of just getting content out, for the purpose of just practicing and doing more at a time as quickly as I can. This comic strip will be pencil, India ink, maybe a little ink wash or Copic marker for gray tones. And it'll be ready to scan in and post. I'd like to do these as quickly as I can to collect them to where I can post those daily or every other day kind of a thing. Okay, so I have a drawing I did here earlier this year of my character D-Control. And a quick background on the character is that he is an industrialist, and sort of mercenary, all around average kind of male character that lives in the 30th century, and he does things like he just lives a regular life, but gets involved in combat, gets involved in all sorts of activities that are part of the gameplay that sort of represents who the character is. And I don't want to get into too much about it, but I'll draw him basically in his civilian clothes. I'll draw him sometimes in armor. He'll be carrying weapons, guns, laser rifles, stuff like that. I'll have to come up with a lot of those designs or ideas so as not to incorporate too much visual reference from the video game. So did I even mention what the video game was? Star Citizen is the video game. It's roughly basically the only game I play, or I have time to play. So my character will, in this scene, my character will be introduced probably in the last panel. I'll have a top. Get that out of here. I'll have a top panel that is a title panel. We'll have the character over here on the right, just kind of a headshot, the title of the comic. And my character D-Control is an industrial player, like I mentioned before. So he does things like mining, salvage, sort of a lot of hard laborous type work for a living, but he still gets involved in combat and war, dogfighting and spaceships and space and stuff like that. He flies a huge cargo carrier, and this cargo carrier is going to mimic a train. I'll get more into more of that another time. But his ship is this massive sort of train engine that pulls along cargo cars, and he uses that to haul materials to and from different planets, different galaxies, wherever he's going, and that's how he makes his money. Along the way, there's pirates, there's all sorts of other things that get in the way that prevent him from getting to where he's going, or making his money, or finishing a goal or a task. So we'll have a title panel up here, and then we'll start drawing in panels, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 right now, maybe 5 panels. So today we'll continue sketching things out and laying things out, erasing whatever we need. Tomorrow we'll probably be hopefully starting on some of the inking. I'm going to go ahead and get the camera a little bit closer. I may need to there we go. Adjust the focus on that a little bit. I'll have to keep doing that as I go. I could use autofocus, but as I move my hand around, it continuously focuses in and out. Almost looked like it was doing it there, but I do have it turned off. We'll have the character off to the side here. He won't be wearing any armor or anything. I'm going to draw in his spaceship flying across the panel. And I need to get... Let's try that. It's going to be a little tricky. But maybe later on I'll adjust my setting here so it's a little bit more manageable. There we go. Alright. I'm still in the sort of sketching in outline stage. It's basically what we're doing today. As far as the stream itself, so I've been going for a little less than an hour and a half. I'm gonna go. Hopefully, I can go another hour and a half to 2 hours. And if that's the case, then hopefully I'll have a lot more done with this than I was planning. I'll try not to do any work offline on stuff I do on the stream. That way, it's all recorded. Everything is recorded. I think I can get away with a little bit of breakout on this panel with his mohawk spikes. When it comes to drawing this stuff out, and sort of how I mentioned before, wait, see, I want to make sure I keep it in the camera view. It's sort of like my figure study. As much as I would love to sit here and work on it all day and push in as much quality into what I'm working on, I do want to get as much done as possible in the shortest amount of time. So when it comes to comics and cartooning, I'll be working with the least amount of detail to show. Oof, yeah, hard to keep everything under the camera here as I'm moving the paper around. But yeah, I'll be considering, you know, cartooning discipline, trying to use less lines, less detail in the drawing, which means that 1 or 2 lines in the drawing may need to portray the most emotion possible. Alright. My homeboy here is wearing a punk rock leather vest. This could be the 30th century and you're still wearing a black leather, silver studded punk rock leather vest. I might need to move my keyboard. Let's do that. And let me move the mic. Boop, boop, boop. Sorry if it's making all sorts of noises. I'll go ahead and back the camera up. It's too distracting being worried about being under the camera at all times. We'll stick with this for now. Yeah, him in the corner here, title, and then a ship where his ship will be here, the sort of engine of the train, and it's pulling in more cargo. Everything will be black, so it'll be a star field. Maybe another detail, maybe a ship or a planet or something back here. I'll think about that as I go. I will hand draw in the title lettering. And if I didn't mention before, I will hand write in any dialogue for the word balloons, onomatopoeia, so forth. Yep, there's going to be lots of paper turning around. I'm just kind of shading things in right now. I'm thinking ahead and in the now, of course, as well. So kind of multitasking in my head a little bit. Just trying to think about, you know, like what kind of ship to put in here in the background, or what else is going to go amongst the stars here. Thinking about also lighting for my character over here, how that's going to look. Okay. Let's see about cleaning up the title here. This you won't see as well, but I will go ahead and start outlining the lettering for the title. There are two S's in this title. Those are tricky. I'm going to get my straight edges in first. Just kind of marking where I have the S's. So I started this yesterday, in yesterday's stream, after doing the figure study. I spent a little bit of time just kind of starting this up. So I'm hoping today's time frame will allow me to get more done. I apologize if my head is in the way, whoever gets in front of the camera here. Need to get a template for that. For the O. I'm going to just use my compass. Don't stab myself with the compass here. I'll go get a template because that's easier to line up with what I've sketched in versus trying to find the center for the hole or for the circle. I'll get that here in just a moment. I'll probably take a short break for a couple of minutes, restroom break, and get some more water and stretch. If I do, I'll give you plenty of heads up and put on the Be Right Back screen. We'll do that here in a few minutes. Let's see here. So for the S's, Okay, the mission part, I'll use a template for. Just want to draw this out a little bit darker. And lining this up, this is a little bit off center, but that's okay. So first word, mission. And then second word, decontrol here in front. Mission being in blocky uniform lettering. Decontrol being more rough and rough-edged and not so uniform. We'll see how it looks. You can always erase and adjust it. I want it to be as centered as possible. I'll play around with the lettering on this. Because I had an idea of how that was going to look. Let me see if I have, oh, here we go. Going to add a new image source to share with you. Sort of the mock-up, which is on my webpage, and I've shared this image before. It's not a new one. Similar to this. Alright, take a moment to fix my headset here. Okay. Mission decontrol. I'll put that right there. If you're watching the vertical stream, you may not see it as well or as clearly, but you should see enough there. How I use just a simple mock-up for the title. I'll repeat that. It'll look a little bit different on the drawing than there on that mock-up cover. I want the word mission to be clear. Here on the colored version, decontrol is overlapping a little too much. The font style that I'm using, that I've used in this digital version over here on the left or up above, are default font styles that I used. I would probably make my own font for that title, so it's not using, you know, an average font style. But if you're familiar with those font families, then you'll probably recognize what was used there. And I would take, from there I would take what I see there and just kind of mess with the style of it, change things up a bit. But I like the messy decontrol on top of the more uniform mission. The font style for decontrol in the colored version is too recognizable. I think it's Flood or something like that. That wouldn't be my official title. Like, it'll change as it goes, but for now I'll stick with what I have and work with that. I didn't even think about this, but let me pull up the little concept drawing I did of this ship, so you have a better idea of when I start darkening in that area here. So you have an idea of what I'm doing, or what I'm drawing. Just bear with me for just a moment. I was pretty sure I had a copy of that. Doesn't look like it. That's okay. Okay, I don't need all of this. Let's see. Those are just regular vehicles. Okay. Sorry if you're on the vertical and it's covering up there. But we'll see both of these kind of together. I want it a little bit bigger over here on the regular stream, not the vertical stream. Okay, so we have decontrol the character here on this color cover. He's the character in the jacket, not the female character. That's just a random character. Over here on the right is a color drawing that I did of his ship. His job as an industrialist is to move cargo from one spot to another, planet to planet, system to system, city to galaxy, whatever, he's moving cargo. Just like a typical train. Its engine is a tall, slender, boxy, rectangular shape. Flared out at the bottom, where there may be the engines, all the inner workings of the engine. And then here, let me focus just on the part that I'm talking about here. Right here in the central piece, just above the circle, is the cockpit area. And if I drew a person for scale comparison, he would be kind of tiny in here. So this little black area here in the center is where the controls and stuff are for the engine. That engine is hooked up to as many cars as he can pull. The more profit, right? Make sure I'm talking into the mic here. So I'll set this over to the side a little bit, but still you keep it there for reference. The other parts of the drawing are relevant, but I just want this to focus, for the focus. Now, I know it doesn't seem super exciting to fly a train in space. It's exciting if you're making a lot of money on it. It's exciting if inside of the main car engine you've hidden all sorts of cool things. Other vehicles, maybe an area where you can contain bad guys or that kind of a thing. There's more to it than meets the eye, for sure. Just doing a light shade of where I'm going to have the background. I'll try to keep my mic on because it's kind of cool to listen to the pencil sounds. But if it does get noisy around here, I'll mute it. Maybe there's a engine trail. Just going to draw a simple shape here, a part of the thruster that sits up top of the engine. The engine itself originally had a propulsion system top and on the sides. But I'll keep thinking about that, how that's going to work. I'm going to use my triangle. Yeah, should be able to. Just want a straight edge, that's all. Sorry if it's getting covered up here. Okay, I'm going to go just a couple more minutes and then take a short break, restroom break and water break. Thinking of the composition of this top panel for the title, I think it would be cool to put some moons or something in the background. I don't know, what would it look like if you had like a planet or something behind them? Just as the overall design. Let's see. Will the ring work? Nope. Oh, I know. Maybe a space station. Specific elements like that help set the environment. I'm drawing a little space station here using simple shapes, cylinder and ellipses. I know it's freehand, but when I ink it, I'll probably use guides, rulers, and stuff. We'll see. Okay. I don't mind going through. Typically, you don't have to do this. If you're gonna, if your intention is to, let me get this out of the way here. If your intention is to fill in large areas with black, it's not really necessary to go through with your pencil and shade it all in. But if you need a visual, go for it. Okay. I'm going to take a short break. I'm going to put it on the Be Right Back screen, if you don't mind. Let me just take a couple of minutes to stretch, get the blood flowing, get some water, use the restroom, whatever I need to do. Because from here, we'll start figuring out the panel layout that we need. Having a simple 1, 2, 3, 4 block setup, I don't think will give me the space I need to tell a short story. So we'll go with 5 panels. Keeping a sort of rule of thirds in mind, with top third, middle third, and bottom third. The top third actually being a little bit more shorter than the rest. How's everything looking from your point of view? Okay. One day we'll get better cameras. Okay, let's take just a quick short break. I'll be right back, guys. I still have my mic on and stuff. Should still have some background music going on. Nothing fancy. Okay, done with the break. Mm. Okay, so I may need to make this comic strip introductory story where maybe he's flying and he's in space, he's in his cargo ship, and he's hauling something. Maybe that's not going to be super obvious at first, but maybe maybe I'll stick with 4 panels, maybe 4 to 5 panels is a short story of him talking about himself, and then the last panel shows something happening or something going on. He comes across something, or he's maybe attacked, or maybe is confronted somehow, leaving a cliffhanger for the next part of it, right? So originally it was just him coming across an event. That event was going to spur a short adventure without getting into too much detail, and wrapping up with, after maybe just a few strips or something. But I think what I'm going to do is start this off as more of an introductory to him, which I think is more appropriate. Excuse me. It may not be the most exciting of starts, but it can always be referred to later on or brought up again. Okay. So I had started off the story with random cargo haulers out in space moving their cargo around when they're suddenly attacked by hostile ships, and maybe they're pirates, but they're attacked by these pirates, and as they're trying to defend themselves, and it's clear in the panels that they're losing their fight, Decontrol shows up at the end. That was the original plan, and then he would come in, and then he would take care of the pirates in the next strip. But that cliffhanger for that would be the cargo involved in that scenario. He would have to help haul that cargo, and then it goes off from there without going into the whole story. I think what I'll do is introduce him. He's just hanging out in his cockpit, flying his ship, and it will end with him coming across this scenario. And then the second strip would be cargo haulers moving stuff, being attacked by pirates, and that's when he shows up. Decontrol shows up. So panel 1. Let's see here. Do I need a gutter in between this top panel, which is going to be mostly black with Starfield and Kaiser? I hear you. Okay, that wasn't him. It was the dog. Sorry, I thought he was scratching on the couch. But a starter field here, so this will be mostly black. Do I need a gutter in between that and panels 1 and 2 underneath? We'll go ahead and put a gutter in there. You really need a spot for the keyboard. Alright, let's see if this works. Tools are too big. And unfortunately, there's not too much you can do about that when they're too big. I want to make sure that's parallel. Close enough. I'm going to use 1/4 inch gutters. When shrunk down to size, they'll be an 1/8, roughly an 1/8. And I like thin, narrow gutters. But since this is going to be shrunk down to roughly an 8.5 by 11 size, and then you know, that would be posted when you see it on your screen, on your phone, or on a computer. Hopefully it's not too thin, so it should be just right. That's part of that, actually. Okay, I'm going to mute the mic for a little bit and put focus into pulling out the drawing, starting off with 1. We'll put him in the cockpit of his ship. That's going to be the main car of his space train, right? A lot of darkness. I'll need to put in an area for dialogue or narration. And then the final panel will be his ship out in space. Basically what we see here. That'll be panel 3, and then the last panel will be him coming across some sort of challenge as the cliffhanger for the next strip. I know I'm doing this by freehand. If I do want to at some point get all my edges straight. It's not long enough. Maybe I'll go with this original mark, and I'm eyeballing a 1/4 inch. It's just outside a 1/4 inch. If I have narration, if I have a balloon, dialogue balloon, or I'm going to try my best to draw things as dark as possible. Such as right now, drawing him in position of the pilot seat. I'm not drawing in any detail, I'm just drawing in big wide blocks, okay? So hopefully that starts to show up for you. In fact, let's just go in. Just bear with me while I adjust the focus. While thinking of these things and sort of imagining what's going on, flying a ship such as his, what he's dressed in, the type of armor he's wearing, what he expects to happen that day. So I talked a little bit about how Decontrol is an industrial player. It does things like mining, collects materials and resources for others to use. And that's how he makes his money and lives in this universe. But along the way, he's going to run into all sorts of trouble and challenges. So he finds himself, you know, in the middle of a war or in the middle of a battle. He finds himself being attacked by pirates, other industrial characters that are maybe in competition with him, that kind of a thing. But I imagine I'd like to, at some point, draw a helmet that allows this mohawk to stick out. I think that would be too cool. I don't think I want to show all of his face. And as he's talking, you don't see all of his face and stuff like that. But then maybe he lifts up his visor or his faceplate. Reveals his face, and then the last panel, there's some sort of conflict going on. Do need to look around, check my streams, make sure everything's doing okay. Hopefully you guys can see what is going on. You see his face right here, maybe his mohawk. Does have a chin beard. And I'm not worried about coming up with the best design ever made for spacesuits and stuff like that, so I do need to keep it sort of generic and easy. But sticking with these, sort of simple shapes to lay things out will give me the opportunity later on when I come back to, do my next stream, continue working on this. It's easy to get back to. So he's in a cockpit, pilot seat. In his ship, you will have co-pilot and other control stations. We'll just see him in this small area. It'll be kind of cramped and stuff. But you'll have not sure if you can see this, but over here to my left is my throttle and strafe controls for flying a spaceship in the video game. I have another control over here that's out of view. That's for my directional pitch and yaw, stuff like that. What he's flying will kind of look like that, where, and I take that back, won't quite look like that. You'll have your control stick, but over here he'll have a slider handle for his thruster and stuff like that. You can always change it later. And he's not in a position where he's stressed, he's a little bit relaxed. Okay. No narration box or anything there, but I do have space over here for a thought balloon, or if he's talking out loud. I don't think I'll use a balloon, but we'll stick with the narration box. We'll keep this side open and clear for art. I'm going to scribble in the area where I will have dialogue. And if you can see here, let's do this. There we go. Okay. I definitely see that intensity of graphite better. Let's go ahead with the bottom line, or bottom border. We have our space for our character in a single panel, and hopefully what I draw in tells enough of a story for showing what environment he's in, the action that he's doing, and the sort of mood that he's in. I don't have a whole lot of room to put in background detail, spaceship parts, nuts and bolts, wires and cables, windows and things like that. Maybe a couple of shapes. I don't need my T-square, so I'm going to get that out of the way. I need a bigger table. This is in case I want to remove his mohawk. Wait, let me move these. Sorry, what was I saying here? I'm removing his mohawk in case I want to show that later on. So I'm keeping in mind that I have enough space in case I want to add that back in. Thinking of what the window is going to look like from inside of that type of ship, where you basically have a wide, sort of narrow, short but wide, sort of visor type of window to look out of. It's going to create a lot of darkness and narrow beams of light inside of his space. Thinking of how small this panel is going to be, I'm not too worried about the detail. I think having just a little bit of shade or some darkness behind him will work just fine. Maybe I need to draw more. Oh, that's what I was missing. Let's do his pilot chair. Let's get you closer. And no, in case anyone was wondering, I'm not going to start off the dialogue with Starlog kind of a thing. I'm not going to do that. I know he's not going to... I have room here for adjusting my dialogue or my narration box to be a little bit bigger if I need to. So I have plenty of space here for that. He's going to have light on both sides of him. This is when I start having sort of more sort of vision as I go along. We'll put, for panel 2, we'll be behind the character, sort of looking out the window, and then we'll have that character basically silhouetted, but his chair will be in between, so maybe I should have his mohawk visible. But the front profile of that doesn't look... Okay, I know what to do. Give him sort of a side profile. Excuse me. Okay, let's go for, let's see, it's 2:30 my time. And I could go stream for a couple more hours, but I do need to do some video stuff and some other things. So I think I'll go for maybe another half hour. Yeah, so I may end up going back in here, kind of change this to where we see more of his, see a mohawk. We'll put his face in shadow, kind of a thing. So he's a little bit hidden. We'll show his head here. But get a sort of 3/4 turn profile. Let's not go beyond the gutter here. Oop, almost dropped my pencil. That'll be the bottom edge of the front window and the top. and then we'll draw in control panel stuff in those areas. Whoops, sorry. And in his pilot position, I drew a straight line for basically the dashboard of the cockpit, but it's a larger control area. He'll have smaller screens and display panels and stuff like that oriented more towards him. Maybe he's watching a movie on one of them. And put one here, kind of situate it a little bit symmetrically. And there, here. If you've ever seen the inside of any of the space shuttles, any of the control panels for any space vehicle, you've seen all the knobs and switches and dials on the more, I guess, mechanical and analog type stuff. You're starting to see more touch screen, less controls. Not all of these panels are screens. Some are maybe control switches and so forth. I am going a little bit retro on this, by the way. And I'm not going to add in too much detail with some of those switches and stuff. I'll do that a little bit later on in another stage. If you spent a lot of your time, a lot of your life inside of a spaceship and flying spaceships, how would you personalize your cockpit? What kind of things would we see dangling from the screens, or what sort of knickknacks would we see lying around, or would it be super clean and sterile? I think it would be a little grungy and dirty. I don't want these panels to be too thick. And so from this view, I thought of him watching like hyperspace. He's traveling faster than light, kind of a thing. And so we see the star streaks. Alright. Narration and dialogue zones. I have plenty of space for narration and dialogue in these upper left and right corners, maybe bottom left and right corner. I could float the narration boxes sort of in the middle here, or maybe in between. So besides his chair in the back of his head, I'm not going to fill in any other areas in case I cut some of that out or erase some of it out. I do like this panel right here though. Yeah, because I could put a big one right here. Could put one here. All right. What we'll do is break up panel area 3 here in the bottom corner. I'll need to back up a little. Into 2 panels stacked on each other, where the top one will show an alarm lighting up. The bottom one, maybe a close-up of his face. The last panel will show his ship being pulled out of hyperspace. with pirate ships around it. In the to be continued. Drawing in the warning light going off. I do need to put some sort of label or something in here. What's the official term for being pulled out of hyperspace? It's on the tip of my tongue. Okay, so maybe about another 10-15 minutes before I stop for the day to work on videos and other stuff. I'm going to post a highlight of what we worked on today. Get my paper turned around here the way I need it. I'll do a close-up of a side profile of his face. He is a sort of, I guess he's in his maybe middle ages based off of the character that I made in the game. The textures and details that I used on the character made him look older, not like a young 20, early 30s, but more sort of middle-aged. So I do need to make sure I draw in those sort of details. Okay, on this final panel, we'll see him dropped out of hyperspace with other vehicles around him. Um, I need to draw them in a way that shows them as hostile. The scale of that ship is shows it too big. Maybe we can see inside one of these cockpits a little bit. Just doing basic shapes to represent the ships. Dialogue. Dialogue. And then down here for a narration box to be continued. You get the idea. Okay. Gonna be a little rough, a little hard to see, but let me see if I can sort of go over this panel by panel before we wrap up. Okay, focus adjustment. All right. Let's see, title panel. Panel 1 will show decontrol at the pilot seat with a narration box. I won't go over dialogue right now. Some of it I'm making it up as I go, but I have an idea of what it needs to say. And then we see behind him, looking outside of the ship. That's hard to see, but we'll show hyperspace lane star lines converging to a point that's in front of them. We'll see control panels, stuff like that all around him situated. Not quite symmetrically around him. Darker areas for the rest of the cockpit. While he's in hyperspace, he gets a warning. So we see a flashing warning, flashing button. And was thinking of a close-up of him with some dialogue here. Not too sure about this panel. I'll think about this one. And then he's pulled out of hyperspace to face cargo pirates. And his ship in here pulling cargo containers. A box here for dialogue. We'll have an area here where we see sort of inside of a cockpit. A to be continued narration box. Another ship and other little ships all pointed towards decontrol ship. He's like, oh shit. And then whatever other dialogue we'll put in there. And then that'll be it for that strip. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 total panels for that. Okay, cool. I'm gonna back out a little bit and say thank you guys for hanging out. Get a focus adjustment on this one. Probably as good as it's gonna get. Okay, it ain't too pretty, but it'll get there for sure. Okay, mission decontrol, comic strip, sort of sketched out, laid out a little bit. When I come back tomorrow, we'll do another figure study, and then we'll get back to work on this. Unless something else comes up, but we'll get back to this and start penciling this out a little bit better, adding in more detail, shading out areas that need to be blackened in, and slowly start writing in dialogue, narration, any onomatopoeia, which really isn't going to happen until this panel here. Yeah, I didn't miss any onomatopoeia. It's just here. It'll be just some bleep bleep. You know what? I didn't even... Did not draw that in. Okay. I'll figure that out later. That's okay. But onomatopoeia, narration boxes, dialogue boxes, so forth. Other than that, we'll just continue on with it next time. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Hope you guys have a good rest of your day. I will be back on Twitch, YouTube, Kick, X, and Instagram. I'm glad Instagram's working for me now. I just needed to keep the window open for the stream to continue, but it looks like it's been recording this whole time, or been streaming this whole time. Don't forget to check out my website, Calderone.art, or you can just type in Calderone.art.com. That'll give you my link tree, some other artwork and other stuff going on. Alright, y'all have a good